Good morning, good afternoon, what time is it, what year is it, Happy New Year, and welcome to the Privacy Formula, powering, your marketing performance with privacy. I dare every single one of you to say that 5 times fast with me. I'm Xan Spewak, I'm the Director of Privacy at Teladoc Health. But before I was in privacy, I was actually one of you. I was a marketer. In my previous life, I helped set the ads and first-party data strategy for health and pharma verticals while in my tenure at Google. Back in 2019, all of my healthcare advertisers had the exact same complaint. They said, Xan, we are really upset with Google. And they were upset because Google had just taken away things like remarketing, custom audiences. Much of their first-party data strategy was gone in a night, right off the heels of GDPR and CCPA. This was really the first taste of what was to come for us, right? Limitation, red tape, changes overnight to your strategy. All of my advertisers had an appetite and desire to be compliant and to be responsible. But they also had to drive goals, right? They had to drive patients, health outcomes, and of course, performance. So today, a lot of people might argue that the environment you're operating in is more limited than ever. I'm going to make the argument that you actually have more tools in your toolbox than ever before to navigate today's world as well as tomorrow's. So here's how we're going to spend our time today in our session. The first half of our session is really going to be about learning and understanding. I believe that when you have a solid understanding of what's going on and how we got here, you're actually able to problem solve better. So first, we're going to talk about the risk in operating without a privacy-driven strategy. It'll be a little scary to start, but it's not all bad because we're also going to talk about the reward and benefit in developing one. Then we're going to take a trip back in time and actually get a little bit of a history lesson on how health marketing and that landscape of regulatory environment grew so complex and so critical in what felt like overnight. Then we're going to use the rest of our time to actually learn how to apply what we've talked about and gained today with a simple privacy formula for more responsible health marketing. My friends Jen and Jennifer just talked about how there is no one-size-fits-all approach for compliance, and I completely agree. So what you'll learn today is just simple tools and foundational pieces that when you place them at the center of your operations and your strategy, you're better equipped for whatever is going to come in the future. If you tune out, you get pulled into emails, I hope you walk away with one thing. That is that privacy-driven marketing builds trust with your users while proactively mitigating and identifying risk. When you fail to invest in privacy design, you will have heartbreak. So let's take a moment to understand. Regulators and regulation changes are not the biggest risk to your marketing, but failing to invest in the tools, the technologies, the resources, the strategy, and actually your team education is. About a year or two ago, there was a study done by Pew Research, and it showed that almost half of US adults stopped using a digital product over data use concerns. I would venture to guess that this number has grown quite substantially since then. So what we know is that all it takes is one misstep to ruin the trust of a user and potentially cause a ripple effect, as Pri talked about this morning. When you lose trust with one, you will eventually lose trust with many in today's environment and how word of mouth and referrals and personal anecdotes influence marketing. If you don't care about trust, which you should, you probably all care a lot about cost. What's really interesting is that globally, breaches, the cost of them, have gone down except for in the United States. And healthcare is actually the most costly industry of them all to have a breach, averaging about $10.2 million. Now keep in mind this $10.2 million does not include things like legal fees, which can be astronomical. It does not include things like what you might have to do in the event of a breach, or if you ever have to enter a consent decree to make sure that you are investing in things that have improved your strategy and have proven that you have done right and done what you have committed to. It also doesn't include things like settlements with plaintiff firms. So we know that this number is actually quite low and maybe generous. It's much, much higher, and it's only growing. Now, we've talked a little bit about the risk, right? Trust can be damaged in an instant. Platforms can be turned off overnight, and your strategy can be flipped upside down in one email from your legal team. So what's in it for you if you do invest in these things and you do maybe take a step back or maybe steps in different directions to reapply? Well, actually, 96% of global respondents in a recent Cisco study said that they have seen ROI and that the privacy investment has actually outweighed the cost that they have put into it. And some are even saying up to 5x return. So we know that this is not just some baseless, nice to have investment. I want to use a little bit of comparison. Not that everything can always be compared. I often hear from marketing teams, from analytic teams, and from product teams that say, Xan, I cannot lose out on this data. I have performance goals to hit. Well, what we've seen is that when you actually do make the investments, the reward and the ROI is fast. It's almost immediate. So when we compare to people who have invested in AI, I'm sure many of you just saw that there was a recent study that actually said that 96% of companies who have made investments in AI have yet to see drastic improvements in their productivity, in the way they work, or really any sort of business value just yet. So while AI is a hot topic and we're all excited about it, it pays to invest in your privacy strategy. Okay, everybody, please hop in my DeLorean because we're going to take a trip back in time to understand how the environment became so chaotic, complex, and frankly, confusing. I believe that in order to solve today's problems and tomorrow's problems, we really have to take a look at how we got here. So let's go back to the best year ever, 1994. The good times in advertising, specifically digital advertising, are getting rolling. In 1994, the first ever banner ad appears, and that's actually it. I didn't just pick the world's ugliest banner off of Google search. That's it. What's crazy about this is that they had no way to measure this random bet that they were taking on banner ads. Hey, let's throw something up on the top of a web page and see what happens. Well, how were you possibly going to know what happens? Right after this, a developer from Netscape actually creates the HTTP cookie. And he does so because he wants to start measuring who is a returning visitor to their site. He also does it because he wants to manage things like preferences, login details, and create essentially a better user performance and have better insight into their website and their users. Now, what's funny about this is that cookie technology technically did exist. But what he did was he found a way to make it more efficient and to actually align and drive business outcomes. And so the use of cookies starts to explode. Then in 1996, DoubleClick comes to market. And what's interesting about DoubleClick, which is something that many of us use today, is that it now provides advertisers and businesses with the ability to place their ads on multiple websites at once. So what does that mean? As people start to adopt the internet and home computers become a thing, dial-up moves to Wi-Fi eventually, everyone is seeing more and more ads. You're able to reach people at all aspects of their healthcare or simply just their customer journey. And you're able to have more creative, you're able to actually understand your messaging a little bit more, and with the use of cookies, you're actually able to then action on it. Then, as we all survive Y2K, Google Ads comes onto the scene in 2000. This is really important because now we have the ability to actually capture the full funnel. We're not just throwing out ads in the top and the mid funnel and hoping and praying that they work. We actually can now essentially create a waterfall effect and drive and fill that funnel and capture high intent. It also allows us to learn about intent and learn about what people really, really care about. There's a belief, as an ex-Googler, they tell you, people lie, but they don't lie to Google. In studies, people who go to Google are actually more honest there than in their day-to-day life. I would bet that also carries true today to things like ChatGPT. So things get ramped up and they get rolling very, very quickly in these 6 years. And advertisers and marketers, they love it because now they have new, sexy, fun advertising, and best of all, they actually have a way to measure it. So enter the golden age, 2000 to 2014. Essentially what happens is we come out of the internet, everyone's adopting platforms, they're adopting new services, but most importantly, social media comes to life. In 2004, Facebook's created in a dorm room, and in 2005, YouTube is developed in a garage. What's really interesting about social media is that if you think we had an idea of who our users were before, we really, really do now. We know exactly what you care about, what you're interested in, what you're not interested in, who your family members are, who your closest friends are, what events you're going to go to. And now we have a whole new understanding of everybody that we want to reach. This is really important because to understand that previously, we would have had to invest substantial amount of time and dollars into in-depth user studies. We didn't have this comprehensive level of understanding before, but now we do, and we also have it about who you hang out with, who you care about, and who even you're related to. So this starts to explode because Facebook and YouTube, they realize that they are sitting on a gold mine. So they monetize the platform through ads. Ads combined with this cookie technology and similar technology provides simple dashboards with deep, deep insights about each and every one of our users. Then in 2007, the Android and iPhone hit the market, the modern smartphone. Well, I said if you thought we knew about them before, we know about them now. Now we really know about them. And above all, we have a way to reach them. Previously, we had to be everywhere at once. We had to be in your home, on your computer, in a newspaper, in a magazine, on the local news. We also had to be outside of your home on billboards, buses, benches, more papers, more magazines, posters. We had to be everywhere at once, and not everything was measurable. Now, we don't have to because we are in your palm and in your pocket all the time. When the smartphone hits, the modern smartphone, so Android and iPhone, people start rapidly adopting apps and they start rapidly using the internet. Now, none of this would really be made possible if it wasn't for the absence of one thing: broad, comprehensive legislation and regulation over online technologies and tracking. This explodes because there's no one saying, don't do that. And now we have a huge gap between what consumers believe is happening, what tech companies are doing, and the lack of regulation and ability from regulating bodies, both federally and at your state levels. Ooh, okay. The fun quickly slows. We're in the Uber and they slam on the brakes. Advertisers become furious. Apple smells blood in the water. They know that the fun cannot last forever. So what do? They take a stab at self-regulation. They start by placing tracking restrictions on their browser Safari and in their iPhones. Now, essentially, they roll out intelligent tracking protection, ITP, which limits people's ability to track you from website to website to website. Consumers are excited about this. They rapidly start adopting Safari because they feel that there is a deeper element of trust, privacy, and respect. On the flip side, though, advertisers, marketers, they're upset. They're left in chaos. They now have to go to their C-suite and their bosses and say, we don't have that information anymore. I actually don't have as much information to make those decisions, and I don't have as much to share with performance. And of course, that becomes limiting very quickly. Almost immediately after Apple starts rolling out these more cumbersome restrictions, GDPR comes to the block. And this is really important because before there was no template or blueprint for governments to model off of. And it also opens up an extremely important conversation around privacy, user information, consent, and trust. So Europe becomes the leading tech watchdog. The first day that GDPR rolls out, Facebook and Google are both hit with $8.8 billion lawsuits. Tech companies weren't ready, advertisers weren't really ready, but consumers were. Now, Europe has this model and the US does not. They're still operating without comprehensive consumer digital privacy laws. Of course, we still have things like wiretapping and VPPA, but things like under those regulations have not yet been applied the way that they are today, which we'll talk about in a second. But something else happens in this time period, and it's really probably one of the greatest social moments of our entire existence in technology, and that's Cambridge Analytica. In 2018, The Guardian and New York Times break whistleblower Christopher Wiley's story about what's happening between Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. Ultimately, up to 82 million Facebook profiles were used without their consent, so tons of personal information, to go on to, quote, influence every voter in America. Now, this is unbelievable to us. In fact, many consumers globally, but especially Americans, have a really hard time of almost conceptualizing how much that is. Because for the first time, they're finally having their eyes open to what's been collected and used about them, how and by who. Now, this sets off a wave of regulation globally. And importantly, as an attempt, they followed Apple's example. Meta tried to get ahead of this before the global fallout came to be, and they said, we're going to take a stab at self-regulation. So what did they do? They kicked Cambridge Analytica and its affiliates off their platform, and they actually started describing this as a data breach, as if they were the victim, not the perpetrator, okay? But that's not enough. Regulators and users, their trust is already damaged and shattered. So we start to see this wave of regulation across the world. And for the first time, we see it here in the US when California passes the CCPA. This is super important because it now provides the US, one, with a template for potentially how other states, and maybe if we ever get lucky, the federal government can moderate and regulate what's happening online. It also provides rights and control back into the consumer's hands. So now California residents actually have some control and ownership over their personal information. But it also pulls into conversation another important topic, which is that now the US especially has a very fragmented approach to regulating this. And what happens in fragmentation is loopholes. So people start having to adjust their strategy, other states start doing their own thing, and we start to see the confusion come about. And this is super important because this is ultimately what leads to a lot of you feeling today like the goalpost is moving and the finish line is getting pushed further and further away from you. It's also what's leading to your tools and your resources kind of dropping like flies one by one. So we know that the fun is quickly slowing for all advertisers. But in 2022, the fun stops in health. I'll never forget it, December 2nd, 2022, OCR and HHS released joint guidance on tracking technology use by covered entities and their business associates. It's broad, it's ambiguous, and it's frankly a little inoperable. But at the same time, there is what's called the pixel hunt that is launched by the markup. And we see that for the first time that there's almost like an investigative journalism approach that's taking a magnifying glass and it's putting it on healthcare. It's putting it on virtual care. It's putting it on hospital systems, urgent cares, and health plans. And so everybody's legal team says, for the first time, what the hell are we doing with cookies, you guys? And I feel that probably everybody in the room had to make a fundamental change in how they were advertising and their data strategy approach. While the FTC and the HHS sent out written warnings to, I think it was like 150, right, Jennifer? 150 entities received letters from the FTC and HHS. State laws start to pop up like mushrooms. And now there's more complexity in an effort to essentially catch up over the last 20 years without regulation. We have a bunch of states trying to cover the gap, right? They are trying to fill the void between what is protected health information and what might simply just be sensitive personal information, or now consumer health data. So we have states like Washington with Washington My Data Act, Maryland with Maryland Online Data Protection Act, MoDPA. Now we're getting these new definitions that are extremely broad, inferred healthcare data. What does that even mean? That could be anything. And that's kind of the point. Because there was no regulation and because there's no, single songbook that we're all working off of, the states are left to do their own things, and we are left with a ton of confusion and, frankly, with our hands tied. So now that you understand how we got here and why we're in this position, and that your legal teams are not crazy because they keep asking you to make changes, these are all very real things and they're very broad, and frankly, I don't think that there is anything black and white about them. And they have to start making difficult risk decisions as very successful plaintiff settlements come out, FTC and HHS comes out, tons of consent decrees are entered. People have to start making fundamental changes. So what can you do today to prepare yourself for our environment that we're operating in at the current moment and for inevitable changes and volatility to come? First, I want to say I understand you all need data and you need visibility. But I hope you learned today that you don't need it at the sacrifice of your users' privacy. Because we know when we misuse someone's data once, we may lose them forever. I don't believe that anybody is afraid of compliance or responsibility. I believe that everybody actually intends to operate that way. But I believe that the reason why sometimes the strategies and the proposals don't always match up is because healthcare marketers are really afraid of losing the last bits of data and performance they have to their name. But let's talk about that. Without data, I get it. Your impact can't be measured and proven. Your budgets can't be justified, and you're certainly not getting anything incremental. They're probably shrinking. You can't really move across the healthcare journey, so now you're absent in really crucial moments where people might be looking for care or simply trying to even build a relationship early on when they experience a symptom for the first time. And probably most importantly, marketing becomes a cost center rather than a growth engine. We know that you guys are the heart of the business, but it's hard to prove that when you don't have any data. But I would argue that you can't have data at all without privacy. You don't have any tracking, or maybe you have some limited tracking. I know plenty of advertisers who don't have a single thing that they're optimizing towards right now. You don't have user trust, and as Pri said, when you don't have trust, you don't have anything. You don't have a brand. You don't have somebody singing your praises on Reddit, where we all go for all of our health information and all sources of truth, right? Then you're put into a poor risk posture. So your legal teams who are helping make decisions and put forth requirements, their risk tolerance is so low, they won't even accept the meeting. You have no data, you have no insights, and you're having zero fun. So how can you use privacy to fuel your marketing strategy? There is no one-size-fits-all approach to compliance and responsibility, but the things that we're going to discuss are all core concepts of privacy by design, which essentially bakes privacy into the center of what you do to build trust with your users. These are all concepts that we see across state laws, so when you nail them and a new state law comes out, or maybe a new legal requirement simply, you're better equipped. You're much more agile because it's already baked into the core of what you do, the core of your technology, and the core of your operations. So here's how you're gonna start. You're going to develop clear, transparent, and accurate privacy policies. I would also say you should be taking a look at your privacy policies at least on an annual basis, and especially if marketing comes to you with something new, you have to update those. When you don't have clear, accurate, and transparent policies, you have a huge risk and hole. It's important that you're talking clearly about your advertising activities. Don't speak confusingly, don't throw jargon out, just be real, okay? How you handle and process personal information, protected health information, consumer data, sensitive personal information is a core part of this. Tell users exactly what you're doing it with, how you're doing it, and where it's going and who it's being shared with. Start here. Then I want to see you gather free and informed consent. We just talked in the last session a little bit about dark patterns. Your consent banner is a tool. It is not something that is trying to ruin your lives. I know that consented data is hard to drive, but when you do, doors unlock, and we'll talk about that. But when you allow users the opportunity to actually make a free and informed choice, that is your first interaction with them. In a healthcare setting, that's amazing to have your first interaction built on trust. So if you let them make this freely informed decision, you ultimately are starting off on the right foot. I also want to see everybody provide an easy way for somebody to change their mind, because people are allowed to change their mind, okay? When you do that, maybe someone might opt out, but you're building trust with that user. You're saying, I care. I know that you have feelings about your information, and I'm gonna make it really easy for you to change your mind. Because that builds trust with somebody. That doesn't drive them off the platform. What drives them off the platform is when you can't change your mind and when you can't update your preferences. Be smart with your consent banner strategy. Take into consideration different geographies like states like Maryland, Washington, California, all of the usual suspects, right? You can also always take a one-size-fits-all approach, which is typically where you take the most risk-averse. Many of the decisions you will make along these are really risk decisions, right? It's really about risk tolerance, and it's about your business, how you operate, your tools, your technology, your data strategy. So now that you've gathered free and informed consent, you've provided that information through the banner and your policies, you should be investing in a server-side platform like Freshpaint. That's why we're all here today, right? To minimize the actual amount of personal information and health context you're sharing back with third parties. This allows us to take a rather minimum necessary approach to handling information, processing it, and sharing it. When we demonstrate that we're willing to remove a lot of identifiers and a lot of health context, again, we're able to build better trust with our users, and we're able to operate with a much greater degree of responsibility. The other important piece of server-side tracking is that it, well, one, allows you to create a bit of a walled garden, but two, it actually puts your first-party data back into your hands. You're able to build up more control and, frankly, ownership. When you're doing client-side, the second somebody's on your site and clicking, it's out of your hands. It's not even yours anymore. It's already to Google, it's already to Meta, it's already to TikTok. But when you use server-side, like Freshpaint, it's in your ecosystem. It's in your business associate's ecosystem, protected and bound by that BAA that you entered. Thank you. So now that you've nailed your policies, you have free and informed consent, you've built a way for people to change their mind, you have server-side platform minimizing your data sharing, you're intentional about the events and the activities and the data you're capturing. And bringing it back to the first point, you are ensuring that they actually reflect your privacy policies and your consents. Don't bundle, don't assume that you got consent. Make sure you're actually getting this and that your events and your activities and your data are accurate. I would also say this is a great point to think about your data strategy. Do you actually need everything? I find you don't. So be smart. Think about what activities and events matter most to you and go after those and do a minimum necessary approach. So these might seem like a tall ask and a tall order, and you might be wondering, where do I even start? I encourage you all to partner with your legal and your privacy teams and counsel to accomplish this. Come to them with a hypothesis and with a goal and ask, how can we achieve this? What you might find, some counsels, depending on risk tolerance and your overall business profile, you might be able to do everything that you want, and you might be able to accomplish these things really quickly. You also might have counsels and legal teams that have a lower risk tolerance. So maybe they can't get you to point A, but can they get you to point A minus, B plus, B? Losing everything is worse than losing a few things. So partner closely with them, be real with them, be honest, talk about shared goals, because at the end of the day, your legal team and you care about one thing in common, the brand. And you know that even in the absence of legal liability, that simply damaged user trust and the claim itself is extremely costly and extremely damaging to your brand. So align around the brand, align around common metrics, and ask for help and for support. So why do this? I told you, I promised you that if you invested, you would get an ROI, and you will. Because privacy by design, that's on your bingo, is a revenue-driving, pro-business strategy. Thank you. People always tell me, privacy, they just take my fun, my tools, my data, and my revenue away. And I don't think it has to be that way because I know it does not have to be this way. So when you design with privacy at the center, you're allowed to better engage with your users. You're allowed to be across their healthcare journey while you're proactively managing risk, which is every counsel's dream. So you start with a privacy-driven tracking approach. You build those foundations. And what does that unlock? It unlocks gold, consented data. There is an old saying, data is gold. That's not true anymore. Consented data is gold. So now you have people's consent. You can do more with it because you've gathered it freely. You've allowed them to make an informed decision. So now doors start to open up for you. And the doors that still stay closed, well, that's okay because guess what? A window just opened. And that window just opened, even though we're in a windowless room. I'll figure out, we can bust through a door, bust through a wall. But consented data allows you to do more. It then allows you to actually see what's working across your funnel, better invest, better tailor your messaging, better target your audiences. And above all, when you're able to do these three things, no matter what, you will drive and improve your performance. You won't just be able to say, oh yeah, we have this regained visibility. No, I actually regained and recovered $10 million in recurring revenue. And the reason we were able to do that is because we had our consents and our policies and our procedures and technologies in place to do so. So the benefits are really clear. When you have an effectively managed risk profile, you're in a better risk posture. Everybody's sleeping better at night. So as an end result, you have better advertising. Again, when you center privacy, you're able to better help people along their health journey, and you're able to drive better advertising. So I want to close this out. I appreciate you all being here. Truly, this was really fun for me. I love talking about these things because I really believe with my whole heart that privacy can be a powerful revenue driver. What's learned here leaves here. So I want you to walk away with a few things. I want you to first walk away understanding that the goalposts will continue to move after all of this time without regulation. That's going to be okay because each and every one of you are going to walk out and put privacy design at the center of what you do. And when you do that, you're equipped to weather whatever storm comes your way. Next, I want you to walk out with this belief: you cannot afford to not invest in privacy. You cannot afford to not invest in privacy. even in the absence of legal liability, the damages can be profound. Third, the simple formula: policies plus consent plus server side plus good events equals trust and revenue. If you walk away with nothing else, privacy-driven design and marketing builds trust with your users, proactively manages your risk, and in turn drives revenue and visibility. Thank you. And if there's questions, I'd love to take them.
Yeah. So one of the things that you were talking about, obviously, is like the importance of the server side events. One of my big concerns is about being able to basically stop advertising to engage clients. But sort of that question comes along with, how can an exclusion audience ever really be compliant? Because you have to ask them all some information to say stop advertising to this person, and there's sort of context there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one really depends on the identifiers you're going to be passing back and the context, right? It also depends on your consents. If you're getting a consent for audiences and you have freely allowed them to make that choice, perhaps that opens doors. That's actually a conversation we're going through ourselves. And there's varying opinions across all of our teams about it. So go to your legal team and ask that question, because it's an excellent question. When you can arm them with, this is the data that's being sent. Okay, well, I don't think we have consent because I looked at our policies. You're gonna walk in, and one, they're gonna take you seriously because you've done your homework and you've demonstrated that you have a really firm understanding. And two, they're gonna be able to then consult and advise you through that. So it's really, really crucial that you understand exactly what that data is, how it ties into your consents, your own company's policies, and risk profiles. But I think that that is going to be a common risk that is hard to take for any entity. Some may do it, some may not. And really, a lot of things, unfortunately, are simply a risk decision, no black and white.
Thank you.
I think you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. I think what I always struggle with is everybody says that they want personalized experiences with a brand, but then I don't think people realize what it takes to give somebody a personalized experience.
Yes.
To know a little bit about you, and I just think like I guess there's just always going to be people that are more comfortable with that than others, right? So I guess it's not just where like how you said the consent comes in. Is there any way to like? Is there even a point to educate people on like what needs to happen? Maybe that would be in the policy or something. I don't know. That's just something I always.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to take that in a few different blocks, because we have over 100 million members. So everybody has a different opinion and everybody feels a different level of comfort. So I'm going to actually give an example from one of my best friends this week. She sent me a screenshot of an email she got from her health plan, and it said something along the lines of how to talk to your doctor about periods. And she asked me, she said, is this a HIPAA violation? I said, well, in my opinion, no. You can tell me if I'm wrong. And the reason is because I'm not actually telling anything about a real condition that you have. I don't know who really, like a subject line on someone's phone, I don't really know, what they're experiencing, if there's any diagnosis or condition, okay? But she still felt completely violated. And she opted out of all emails. And I was like, I don't wanna, I agree with you, it was a little creepy, but now you're not gonna get as much care information. You're not gonna get reminders about things like breast cancer screenings or pap smears and things like that. So ultimately, you're always going to have different opinions. So when you educate people and you give them examples of what that might look like, what you will gain and what you will lose. For instance, if you opt out of a functional cookie, you should be telling them what it does. Functional cookies, they remember your login, they provide things like chat, video, they give you a more personalized experience. Be aware, if you opt out of this, your experience is going to change. It will not be as personalized and it may not be as functional. But don't worry, you can always opt back in by clicking your privacy choices in the footer of your site. So inform them of the risk and the reward and let them change their mind freely. But ultimately, one thing that I personally live by is that even if it's not technically wrong. If it doesn't feel right, it's wrong.
You said the goalposts are constantly changing. Where do you see like the regulatory ship going for current policies?
I think it's only going to get worse and more confusing. And my friend Jennifer can probably answer better, but I think we're going to continue to see state laws come up. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of advancements around inferred health data and consumer health data. For instance, in Maryland with MoDPA, I don't think you're allowed to actually take consumer health data, track it, and then use it for advertising. I don't even think you're allowed to track it. So I would say that it's going to get more cumbersome, more confusing, and on top of it, as more companies experience more complaints, whether they be from, like demand letters, plaintiff attorneys, their risk profiles are going to change. Consumers are telling us they care more and more and more about their privacy. Teladoc's B2B2C, so we have two sets of stakeholders, consumers and businesses. Our clients, also our business clients, care so much about it. So the regulatory environment, I think, is going to become more challenging from state laws. I think you're going to see a lot of efforts around consumer health data. I think you're also going to see risk profiles change as people experience things or even get outreach from their members about feeling uncomfortable about personalization, types of messages they receive, types of ads they saw after they left your website. Do you want to add anything?
I guess it's just to keep in mind is before the session before we're talking about how this sort of like obviously there's been a shift in the integration at the federal level, which is sort of change or how the federal agency goes CR and see the like are sort of pursuing. But that's they are still doing this doesn't mean like the federal government is silent. They also have legacy things that may not be sort of healthcare driven, but will impact sort of how we do marketing. So for example, thinking about for any of those who sort of report children's information, that's really a huge issue with healthcare and minor and behavior education. It's not necessarily having a healthcare context, but it is still happening, right? Dark patterns are also a big deal, even though it's leading very significant, not necessarily specific to healthcare, but just sort of overall sort of legislation. Those are the mechanisms also.
Thank you. Any last questions? I have a minute left.
I don't know if you want to share, but something we struggle with is how to like any lead sign up or sale conversion, how to send that data out in an appropriate way. And I feel like multiple people I've talked to have different perspectives. Like some people are not comfortable doing that at all because it's like a healthcare decision to sign up or even just provide lead info. Others sort of more risk tolerant. They're like, okay, if we strip out URLs or make the events unclear, this is okay. I don't know if you have a perspective on that, but I feel like that's obviously an unlock on the marketing side, but there seems to be gray area there. So I don't know if you're willing to share anything on that.
Yeah, and I'm at time, so I'm going to be short, but we can definitely talk one-to-one later. It really comes down to there is no black and white. There is no this is right or this is wrong. It's really about your own and your legal team's own interpretation and assessment. And so you just kind of mentioned it actually, it's really a risk decision. And I think that risk decision is made by understanding the company's overall risk profile, the data that you're doing, and how you're essentially sending that back, but also like how your patients, members, your ultimate users also care about it, right? Consent, of course, comes into play there, but there is no, yes, this is right, or this is like, no, this is wrong. It really is varying, I think, legal team to legal team and based on your own technology and strategy. But we can certainly talk one-on-one and can probably share even more. All right, thanks so much.